Like I said, I'm JD Other. How many people here have never been here before? All right, we do have a few. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Hope you come. We keep coming. Pleasure to have you here. Wanda always brings great snacks. Feel free to help yourself throughout the time we're here. All right. So the story I'm going to tell today, it's July. It's not just about celebrating independence and all those other things that are somewhat ironic right now, but also our heritage as a people. And this story starts in 1889. 1889, Washington, D.C., a young man is born to Hungarian and British immigrants. Married, had a boy named Antony Jessup. I say Antony because there's no H in the name. It's A-N-T-O-N-Y, Antony. Antony Jessup. He was born in 1889 in Washington, D.C. A few years later, in 1904, the Wright brothers fly a plane for the first time, famously. Right? And this is an event that will shape the rest of Antony's life. After the Wright brothers start flying, everybody else starts trying to build planes and open schools and open engineering. And Annie, he goes into Maryland. He goes to an engineering school. And nearby, there's this guy, Rex Smith, who has just opened up a flight school. And there's flying planes. It's famous, Rex Smith, for flying planes around the Washington Monument and stuff. This school out of Maryland. He goes into the technical school where Antony Jessup is taking classes and hires him right out of the school to become one of his mechanics at this new airplane factory in school. He's working on the planes. He gets a few quick lessons from Rex and then basically teaches himself how to fly a plane. These little biplanes, which are not very complicated as compared to today's planes, but he manages to teach himself how to fly. This is all happening 1910, 1911. He's working with Rex Smith. He's flying. He becomes a flight instructor. He teaches himself so well. By the end of the year, he's a flight instructor for Rex Smith. 1912, he gets hired out by a guy in St. Louis, Benoit, who's manufacturing planes out there. Not only biplanes, but he's trying to make boat planes. And by boat planes, I mean picture a canoe with a biplane wing slapped on top of it. This is what he's doing. He's making these. And he's making some regular biplanes as well. He hires Antony Jessup to come work for him. In 1912, Antony Jessup sets 2 new world records. The first one he does is he flies up to just over 1,500 feet. And for the first time in world history, a man jumps out of a perfectly good airplane with a parachute on and makes it safely to the ground. Before that, this guy had been jumping out of apparently perfectly good hot air balloons. But now he was doing it out of moving aircraft because people like to do that, jump out of perfectly good airplanes and other things. So that was the first time that had ever happened in human history. And then later that year, Antony Jessup sets a new record, being the first person to fly. It was the longest flight that had ever happened to date, flying from Omaha to New Orleans. Now, he didn't do it all at once. It took him 6 weeks to cover this distance from Omaha to New Orleans, having to stop along the way. At one point, his plane caught on fire. He still kept going. At another point, he had to stop. He was having terrible stomach pains. He had been transporting a case of beer for the owner of the airline, Benoit. He drank the entire case of beer, bought another case of beer, drank that whole thing, just so he could quell the terrible pain in his fire in his gut and get back in the plane and fly it with this gut pain, with the 2 cases of alcohol into him, and make it the rest of the way to New Orleans, where they discovered, upon taking him to the hospital, that his appendix was about to explode. And he flew the plane in that. I don't know if any of you have ever had appendicitis. I have. It is horrible. I can't believe, I don't know how he met. Anyway, so this is the kind of man that Antony Jessup is. This is 1912. 1914, he comes to St. Petersburg, Florida. Brought here by a salesman, a boat salesman, who decided he wanted to build the first commercial airline in world history here, going from St. Petersburg to Tampa. First he went to Tampa, tried to convince them to do it. People from Tampa, first of all, they didn't believe a boat could fly. They had some skepticism about the whole thing. They had seen a plane earlier that year fly over the city, but they were skeptical about this whole flying thing. And also, they didn't really want the people of St. Petersburg coming easily to their city, so they weren't really on board with the whole project. So he goes over to St. Petersburg to get them to do it. Took some convincing. They also were skeptical about the whole flying concept, but he finally convinces them, gets the board, the city council members to invest in the company, but also gets them to use tax dollars to provide a subsidy for this company. He gets private investment. He gets it all set up. Tampa, they say, if you're going to land here on Tampa side, we need licenses for the planes and for the pilots. So they go and they get it's in the record books. They got licenses for a steamboat pilot and just crossed out the word steamboat and wrote airplane over top of it. And that was how they got it licensed legally. And January 1st, 1914, the first commercial airline flight in the history of the world, leaves St. Petersburg. It takes it 23 minutes to get from the 21 miles from St. Petersburg to Tampa Bay. You got the pilot, Tony Jessup, sitting next to him is the mayor of St. Petersburg, former mayor, I believe, of St. Petersburg, Field, last name is Field, P-H-I-E-L. The thing is about the size of a kayak. Picture a kayak that's wider in the front and real narrow in the back. Behind the seat is the biplane wings. There's a wing right here, and then there's another wing above your head, and then on the back side of the wings is the propeller. So right behind your head, there's this propeller spinning. He's flying across about 50 feet above sea level across the water. Apparently he had to stop halfway and landed in the water so that he could fix something with the engine, and then got it up again and made it the rest of the way across. Thousands of people waiting on the Tampa Bay side. When they eventually came back, there were hundreds on the St. Pete side because there was only about 8,000 people living in St. Pete at the time. It took them 23 minutes. Now, at that time, that was amazing because if you wanted to get from St. Pete to Tampa, a boat would take you 2 hours. A train would take you 12 hours. And if you had a car that you cranked up the engine to get it started, because this is, again, 1914, 20 hours to get from St. Petersburg to Tampa. So you think traffic's bad now? 20 hours. So this was amazing. 23 minutes. They fly across. The airline runs till March. And then the subsidy that the city government had been providing runs out. They continue to run it for a couple of weeks, but when the snowbirds had left, there wasn't enough locals who had any interest in going across the bay to see the other people to continue to run the airline. And so it shut down, and that was the end of the first commercial airline in America. So when you go to the airport and you're frustrated with how terrible this whole system of commercial airlines is, remember, that's us. We started that whole thing right here in St. Petersburg with Anthony Jessup, who would 2 years later pass away. He predicted that he would someday crash, and while he was recovering, he would write a book about it. 2016, World War I, Tsarist Russia is an ally of ours, of the United States, in the war to end all wars. And he goes over there to train Russian pilots to fly the biplanes they're going to be flying, like the one Snoopy was supposed to be flying. And over the Black Sea, they go down due to engine trouble. The 2 Russian pilots that were in the plane, their bodies were recovered. Jeff's body was never recovered. He never wrote the book, and he was never heard from again. That's the story of Anthony Jessup, first commercial airline in America.